Do that right now. And then wanted to introduce Mr. or Dr. Will Tauxe. Wave at us, and please unmute yourself, Will. And we also have Mr. Carl Sprayberry. And I saw him, there you are. Awesome. Thank you so much for both being here. And what we're going to do tonight is basically have about 5 minutes from each of the gentlemen to do kind of an opening statement, tell us about themselves. And then we have a couple of questions that Harry drafted and we went through and that I sent to Carl and Will. And so I'm going to kind of go back and forth with them and allow them to answer those questions. And then we will take questions for from the whole, from anybody in the group. And then at that point, we'll try to wrap this up by 8 o'clock. So why don't we go alphabetically by first name? And let's go Carl. Carl, are you, please introduce yourself and tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Carl Sprayberry. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. First off, I would like to thank the Muskogee County Democrats for hosting Dr. Tau and I tonight. Is that how you say your name, Dr. Tau, or so?
It's Tauxe, actually.
All right.
Like Stokes.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tauxe. I hope that you recover quickly from your illness. I am about to turn 28 towards the start of June. I will be 28 come the actual primary day. I am currently enrolled at CSU, and I have had prior experience as manager in a few restaurants in Columbus, Georgia. And is it okay if I kind of give a bit more in-depth statement, or should I save some of this for the questioning?
No, absolutely. Just tell us, you've seen the questions, so you know what we'd be asking. Just fill in everything else.
Okay. So as of July 2018, Georgia has over 1.8 million people covered by Medicare and the CHIP program. Over 720,000 more Georgians would be covered had the state of Georgia accepted Medicaid expansion under the ACA. Last year, the state legislature finally enacted legislation to adopt Medicaid expansion for those earning up to 100% of the poverty line, as opposed to 138% as called for in Obamacare. The time wasted by not expanding Medicare has cost Georgians their lives. Hospitals, especially in rural areas of the state, such as Albany, lost out on quite a lot of funding from the refusal to accept Medicaid expansion, which was purely political. The additional funding would have allowed hospitals to have more doctors, more personnel, and would have had them better able to manage the coronavirus pandemic. Elected officials who stood in the way of getting healthcare access to hundreds of thousands of Georgians must be held accountable, and we must expand Medicaid to 138% of the poverty level. And I'll save the rest for the questions. Unmute yourself, Laura.
I muted myself, so you didn't hear my phone notifications going off. Great. Thank you very much for that information. And it's great to meet you and talk to you in person. You know what I mean. Zoom in person. So, okay. Will, I asked you this once, but I wanted to know, when we talk about you to people, should we say Dr. Tauxe? Should we say Will Tauxe? What do you prefer?
Well, yeah. Well, here, I'll get into that.
Okay.
Whatever you're comfortable with. I don't consider it something that I need to put out there. It's still a recent addition to my name.
Okay.
So a little bit about me. I'm a relative newcomer to the Muskogee area. I grew up in Atlanta. I went to public school there and did okay. We ended up going to Yale after that. When I got out of Yale, a lot of my friends were going to law school, going on to grad school, going on to make a lot of money at Wall Street. And I ended up becoming a public school teacher in Brooklyn, New York City, in the inner city. And got a master's degree in education and worked for a good 4 years. Came in with a fabulous group of young kids as freshmen, high school, and stayed with them until they graduated. So a lot of the struggles that you go through, it's the problems that people have are seen everywhere. New York, it's all together. Muskogee, those same problems are there. They're just a little bit more spread out. After I did that, I spent a couple years in the private sector working on some software solutions to some educational problems that I saw. And then after that, I transitioned and went to med school. I attended Emory University Med School, graduated from there, and ended up placing down here. I feel very fortunate at the family medicine program they have here at Piedmont Hospital, where I'm now, I have an app on my phone that tells me, but I'm about 6 weeks shy of graduation. So at which point I'll be going out as an attending in my own right. As a couple of people alluded to, and I'm very graciously thankful to Carl. It's nice to meet you, and I appreciate your kind thoughts. I recently went through a pretty bad bout of the coronavirus. Had to be admitted to the hospital, spent about a week on oxygen support. Didn't quite have to be intubated, and I've been able to rebound very successfully. I've been able to get back to work, which is great. As an essential worker, you know, it's good to be able to stand in your line and do your part. However, there are a lot of issues around coronavirus that are happening in Georgia right now, and I think my experience puts me in a position to speak compellingly about some of the things that we need to be doing on there. I certainly don't think that opening up is the solution right now. I've heard people make the illusion, you know, it's kind of like you're falling, you got your parachute out, and then, oh, we're not going down so fast. I guess we can take off the parachute. That's kind of what it feels like right now. I love it here in Muskogee. I think the folks that I find down here are absolutely terrific. It feels like home already. When I was thinking about running here, I basically I kind of looked at my district, was looking at my voting options, and recognized that, you know, I'd like to have the option at least to vote for someone to represent me with whom I agree. And I didn't really have that. The more I got into it and learned more about Richard Smith, I saw, you know, I think there may be some vulnerabilities that we can target. And if nothing else, I think it's incumbent upon us to stand up an opponent to the incumbent as the loyal opposition here in Georgia. I think there is this coronavirus thing is really showing the need for change, the need for disruption, both in the private sector and in the public sector. I think there's a lot of institutions in the Georgia state government that are poised to change the way they deliver their services to the Georgia public. I think we need to get some fresh blood and some fresh experience into the Georgia state legislature to try and make that happen. Okay, back to you, Ms. Walker.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Glad you're feeling better. I was trying to reach you to organize this, and I Googled your name because I thought maybe I could find a different, you know, an email address or something. And what popped up was an uncle that posted, "My nephew Will Tauxe is in the hospital," and I'm thinking, what? Will Tauxe? How many Will Tauxes can they be? That's a doctor, and that's how I knew. So I'm so very glad. I really am. I was worried about you. So glad you're here. Glad both you and Carl are brave enough, responsible enough, and, you know, care enough about your fellow Georgians to put your name in the hat, because I know that that's not easy. And but I really appreciate it. We're so lucky to have both of you. So I'm going to start with the questions, and I'm going to start with Will first on this one. And that is, and you kind of just talked about that a little bit, how much do you know about your challenger, the incumbent Richard Smith, and how do you plan to hold him accountable on his stances and history in the State House?
Okay, well, obviously that's the critical question here. I don't know too much about Richard Smith, and the more I get into it, the more I find that not too many people know too much about Richard Smith. Mm-hmm. I know he went to LSU, which apparently isn't too kindly looked upon in these parts. I know that he came up into the state government through the state extension service. That's where he originally worked. Ask yourself right now, do you know what the state extension service does? We'll return to that subject in a moment. I know that Mr. Smith has not been opposed in his current seat for quite some time, at least over a decade, at least since the House District 134 borders were organized, as I understand it. He has not faced any opposition. I think in that time, his district has changed from a more rural, more farming-oriented position to a much more suburban, much more cosmopolitan kind of district. I think his representation is also now a lot younger than it used to be, and I think a little bit more tech-savvy than he may be used to. You can see from his filings that he's raised a good deal of money. I think he's up to raising about $200,000 per election cycle. As an unopposed politician, that's pretty good. But I think some of those people would like to see some of their money spent on the election. Looking at the bills that he's passed, I see not a lot of service to constituents. I see a lot, well, I see a few bills on insurance. And he seems to get a lot of visits from insurance companies with ideas about how he needs to be writing legislation. I don't see anything that he's done particularly that has benefited the people of Muskogee. He has been in office long enough that he has garnered the seniority to be the chairman of the Rules Committee. And in that position, I think he's had a little bit of political clout. He's been able to throw his weight around a little bit. An interesting thing that I found in the recent budget negotiations, as they were before everything got thrown out of whack by coronavirus, is that, as you know, we were sitting on a budget surplus. Governor Kemp decided this is the perfect time to cut the budget for everything across the board, issued an order. And then after that came out with a couple exceptions for just a couple programs to which they did not need to make the cuts. One of which was the extension service. Again, it's hard not to see Mr. Smith's thumbprints on that. The extension service, which again, I was intrigued to learn, some of you may be more familiar with it than I am, is actually a part of the farmers education process here in Georgia. And it's a big thing as far as reach out from the academic setting, bringing knowledge out to the rural farming districts. I think that I think that's a good idea. I think there are other ways to spend your political capital to benefit the people of our district. I think our folks here know how to farm. I think we're needing to spend that money in other ways. And I think I see a lot of our institutions, like the local health department, has really been starved of funding to the point where it's not really able to effect any kind of meaningful response when we need it to. So that's the sort of things I would bring up on the campaign trail against Mr. Smith and in a debate with him as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. Carl, what do you have to add to that? What do you know about Mr. Smith, and how do you plan to hold him accountable?
Well, Will already covered much of his insurance background. He is an a licensed insurance agent here in the state of Georgia. And if you go through all of the donor filings that have to be submitted every year, you see Matt's donations from all these various insurance companies. And he's the one who's supposed to be writing the laws governing them. That, to me, immediately smells of corruption. I remember when he was, I want to say it was late 90s that he was on the city council when I was a little kid. I remember him from then. I don't ever recall him doing very much for the city as when I was that young, anything like that. Besides that, Dr. Tauxe went through quite a lot of what I already was able to find out about him.
Mm-hmm.
He has served as a state house rep.
Okay, well then now we flip it. You get the opportunity to be the first to answer the next question. And again, y'all, we will take questions at the end, just FYI.
Okay.
So next question is for Carl. Georgia is currently held back by a Republican Party, which is obsessive about keeping Democrats out of political power. Within the last few months, the state government has been forced by COVID-19 to consider expanding participation in the primary through vote by mail, while also making an obsessive show of attacking voter fraud by setting up a task force for investigating and penalizing anyone who may mistakenly fall afoul of these laws. What measures, including laws and/or amending the state constitution, would you support to permanently empower the democratic voting rights of all Georgians beyond 2020?
Well, if we go and look at the election fraud that actually occurred during the 2016 and 2018 elections, we see that it was voter fraud being committed by Republicans in the state of North Carolina. There was a Donald Trump voter in Texas who voted in person twice. She was, of course, arrested when she was trying to vote the second time on Election Day in 2016. But so, ignoring the fact that there's almost zero actual voter fraud that goes on, like they try to claim it's such this big issue when it's really not. One of the major things that I would do is try to implement automatic voter registration. If you go down to the DMV, you get your license, you get your learner's permit, you automatically get registered to vote. You're already able to file to enlist in the draft when you do that. So why not go ahead and make it possible to register to vote right then and there as well? You have the documentation with you. There's no reason not to. Another thing that I would do is extend voting by mail throughout the general California, Washington, Oregon. They already do it. Other countries such as the UK implement voter by mail. They have much higher turnout rates than we see here in the United States overall. And one more thing that I would do is I would definitely try to push for a law to make it a state holiday every election day. That way people are able to not have to decide, are they going to exercise their democratic choice or are they going to try to make money that day?
Awesome. Will, what do you have to add?
All right. Well, I definitely agree with some of the stuff that Mr. Sprayberry is saying as far as making Election Day a state holiday. I'm 100% on board with that. I think, you know, in a democracy, the quality of your democracy is directly related to the turnout that you get in your elections, the reliable turnout. I think all these most concerning statements that has been coming from the GOP about how if everybody voted, then we would surely lose is rather telling as to their cognizance of the reality here. I think one of the reasons also that I was driven to consider running was when I actually looked at the maps that we have for the local districts here in Muskogee. The one for House District 134 is very interesting. If you, I noticed that I live about 3 houses away from the southernmost border, and if you look at it, it's a big, you know, it's got a big kind of more rural chunk there. Then it comes down into North Columbus, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere there's this little spike that comes down that is clearly intended to encompass the country club and the surrounding historic neighborhood that we have here in this nice 1920s streetcar neighborhood that we have down here. If you go outside this isthmus, it quickly gets rather rough, and people will try to sell you drugs. I think that we see that with this obvious gerrymandering here, where you have a lot of racial and socioeconomic disparities that are occurring, even though everybody's living cheek by jowl here in Columbus. I think that's very concerning here. I think there's a lot to be said for getting more people to vote. I think everything that Carl is saying about voting by mail is absolutely right. The military does all of their voting by mail when they're on deployment. I think it seems to work okay for them. I think there's a lot to be said for having a reliable, physical, recountable ballot. And the concern that a lot of people are having around voter fraud would be alleviated by making the voting process more transparent, not by getting more electronic machines that just go beep. Let's see. That's about, and lastly, I think that the other thing that makes a big difference here is that if you're given the chance to fill out a voting ballot by mail at home, you're given time to look everything up. Voting should be an open book test. If I can let my teacher mentality come out here, I think a lot of people think that, you know, you got to go into the vote and you got to just put it all in and not look anything up because that's cheating, and it's not. You need to be able to look at all the everybody that's running and consider their votes instead of just punching the incumbent. And I think giving people the vote by mail option would encourage that to happen. So we need some laws to make that happen. All right.
Great, thank you. So flipping it again, you have the next question first. Um, we brought this up as we referenced. You've had personal experience with COVID, and both of you definitely understand the financial reasons why the state government under Kemp has forced certain businesses to reopen and seen its negative impacts. In light of the pandemic, which state laws do you think have held Georgia back from being able to protect all of our healthcare, our employment, housing, education, transportation, civil rights? How would you consider changing some of our laws to protect us in the case of such extreme economic hardship?
Great. Okay. So I don't want, Carl already kind of got into the weeds with the Medicaid expansion thing, which I'm 100% agreeing with. Just some things for everybody to consider when it comes to the healthcare system that we have here in Georgia. What we've seen over the last 10, 20 years of GOP rule has been a lot of consolidation of hospital systems. Right now, we got maybe 3 or 4 big hospital systems that run most of the hospitals in the state. We don't have a whole lot of freestanding hospitals right now. It's Emory, it's Piedmont, it's Phoebe. Those are kind of the big ones that are running most of it. And the reason that's happening is because all the freestanding hospitals have either closed or had to sell out. And what we're also seeing right now, especially as a lot of these hospitals are having to, bye Dominic, a lot of these hospitals are having to cut a lot of their costs right now because they're not able to do elective surgeries. They're not able to do they're not able to do the procedures that people actually pay for. So they're not getting paid. Therefore, they're seeing their bottom lines drop out from under them. And this is at a time when we need the hospitals to be working at full capacity, ready to take anything on. And instead, they're looking at, do we need to close? Do we need to make some unfortunate financial decisions? One of the things that I think is not addressed often enough is that we've had 7 hospitals close in the last 10 years. And the big reason for that is that they're providing a lot of care to people in Georgia that they're just not getting paid for. We have a law here, it's a federal law called EMTALA, Emergency Medicine Transfer and Labor Act, that basically stipulates that if somebody shows up and they're sick, you got to take care of them until they're able to get out of the hospital and take care of themselves. The hospitals are doing that anyway. The difference is that under a Medicaid expansion where more people have health insurance, the hospital gets paid for more of those patients that they're taking care of. There's a lot of patients here in Muskogee that are receiving care at St. Francis and at Piedmont who are not able to pay for their hospital bills. I'm looking at my hospital bill right now. I was in the hospital for a week, and the hospital bill is my entire annual salary. We're still waiting, and as a resident, I don't make that much, but I'm still waiting to see how much my insurance will cover, needing to see how that's going to shake out. I know that the hospital provided me with excellent care, and I know they're getting paid for that care. And I think we need to find ways to make sure that that is true for more of Georgia. We talk about what's happening with hospitals has also been happening with a lot of the rural physicians. There's way too many counties here in Georgia that do not have a doctor in them. And that's true here in the area around us as well. That comes apart in part because of how the state encourages that kind of healthcare activity, and right now that does not at all. I think there's a lot to be said for finding ways for the state to make it easier for doctors to work in the rural setting. I think there's a lot to be said for finding ways to make sure that hospitals are getting paid for the care that they are providing. I think the other thing that coronavirus is showing us as sort of punching a big reset button on society here is that there's a lot of changes that we can be doing with school. I've been startled to find that some of my parents who, some of the people I know who are parents with students who were previously struggling a lot in school ended up finding now in the homeschooling environment, doing everything through Zoom, that the kids are actually much more attentive, that they're actually getting a much better learning experience. I think we're going to see after this that there's a way to do a lot more education online cheaper. We have to do that. We have to change the paradigm of how schools operate. I think most of us remember school as an unpleasant experience, and I think we can do a lot at the state level here in Georgia to make that more appealing. Okay, I've talked enough.
Wait a minute. Thank you, Will. Carl, what do you have to add?
Piggybacking off of some of the stuff that he said regarding Medicare expansion, taking care of rural citizens, that is something that I find absolutely critical. A large part of the reason why we have already reopened the state is because prior to the shutdown, I think March's BLS unemployment number was at a historic low here in Georgia of 3.1%. And as of last week, it has skyrocketed to almost 30%. Kemp and other Republicans saw that high unemployment number, and they know that high unemployment is tied directly to the incumbents losing their seats, period. And that is a number that hasn't been seen since like the Great Depression. So that is the reason why that they have done that. They have decided to put the economy before lives, which frankly was not needed. We could have easily taken care of our own people and not worried about getting reelected and all of that. The fact is, restaurants have been impacted severely. A lot of the ones here in Columbus have lost 25% or more in sales due to the loss of all dine-in services. Our airline manufacturers such as Cessna, Pratt & Whitney, Kaiser Warren, can't think of a few more. They have had to furlough workers for a few weeks. Those are high-paying manufacturing jobs that people are either going to be laid off from, or like my father, he has been furloughed for a few weeks, just came off of a week of furlough and will be furloughed again, I think either next month or in July. They already have that scheduled because of the travel restrictions. So many of our businesses, I could just go on and on about barbershops, salons, etc., that have had to be closed. So everyone is feeling the crunch in their pockets because of this. I think it is incumbent on our state and our federal government to provide assistance to every citizen. And a lot of the reason why people are not able to pay their bills on time, they weren't making enough money in the first place. So we have to work on raising wages here. We have to provide sick relief, which people cannot do right now. Georgia is a right to work state, which means that basically they've tried to shut down all of the unions that you can have here. A worker can, or an employer can fire their worker for any reason. They don't even have to give one. They can just come in one day, their job's gone the next. That is something that we need to change. We need to make sure that we have worker security, worker rights again here in this state and others throughout the South. And basically, I just don't think that Kemp is capable of managing this crisis. He has shown himself not to be. April 1st, he got on the news when he was announcing the quarantine and said that he didn't know until the prior day that it was transmissible through asymptomatic carriers, which is ridiculous because we knew weeks in advance, weeks before then, that if you were asymptomatic, you could still be carrying the virus on you. We knew that. But Kemp got on national news and he just told a bold-faced lie to the country, basically to explain why he hadn't taken action already. And that is something that Kemp needs to be held accountable. And if Richard Smith is not going to hold him accountable, then either me or Dr. Tauxe need to do so.
God, you think I'm a newbie here, I guess. Thank you, Carl, very much for that answer. That was some definitely some interesting points there, some things I hadn't thought of. Last question that I have for both of you, and Carl, you'll be the first person to answer it. And then definitely, you guys, I hope you're thinking about questions that you have for our two candidates. We've already kind of referenced that, you know, that a Democrat hasn't been in this seat for over a decade. and Smith hasn't had a challenger in that long. So if you are the nominee, what are your plans to get out the Democratic vote in this district? How do you plan to reach out to your base? How do you plan to stay involved and in touch with your constituents once you get elected? Carl, you first, please.
All right. First, we have to accept the reality. This is quite a rural district. It goes heavily Republican. I believe that if you look at the precincts here in Georgia and here in Muskogee County and in Harris County, I live really close to Macon Road. If I just lived on the other side of Macon Road, I would be in District 133. So like Dr. Tauxe had said earlier, it is a very interestingly drawn district. But here in Muskogee County, Kemp beat Stacey Abrams in these precincts by about 20%. In Harris County, it was by an even larger margin. I want to say somewhere 35, 40%. So this is definitely an uphill battle for whichever one of us is able to secure the nomination. But there is a very large college right smack dab in the center of the city that there's a lot of younger voter turnout that has been absent for several elections. Either Dr. Tauxe or I should be able to do a much better job getting those people to come out, register to vote. We can work in the area that he was talking about. There's a lot of minority voters who struggle to get to the voting booths. In Harris County, I actually work with quite a few people who live in Harris County. And frankly, if we just get out and talk to these people, they are able to see where we're coming from. And when they hear about Richard Smith, when they see what Governor Kemp is doing, they are not satisfied. So I do think that we can have quite a bit of crossover voting as well. All we have to do is reach out.
Excellent, Carl. Thank you. Will, what are your plans?
All right, so I admit I kind of went into this with a sort of a, well, let's see what happens kind of attitude when I originally filed the paperwork. I'm intrigued to see that the GOP does seem to be handing us an opportunity here by their own mismanagement. I think the electoral battlefield is a little different this year because of coronavirus. We're not really able to do the traditional sort of going out shoe leather, knocking on doors, just because it's not responsible. And you know, it's if we're pitching ourselves as the responsible responders, then going around and you know, high-fiving everybody is probably not the way to go. But I also think this is a much younger district than it has been in the past, and I think a lot of people are at home bored with nothing to do except dork around on Facebook. I think there's a real opportunity here with some carefully produced Facebook ads and online messaging to target our voters here in this district. I think people have a lot of time to think about the issues right now. I was interested to see that we're furloughing our public defenders. I hope we're also furloughing all of our prisoners from prison as well. I think we're going to need to find a new way to interact with voters this year, and I think it's gonna be incumbent on us to be more nimble. I think if Richard Smith tries to run his usual type of campaign, the standard, you know, yard signs campaign, I don't think that will be as effective as a younger, for want of a better, not necessarily younger, but at least a more up-to-date approach. I think Carl's right that this is a more rural district, but farmers are not fools. Farmers are very aware of reality, and I think right now there's a lot of things that are hurting how farmers are operating. And I think they're going to be in a position to maybe be looking for a change here in November. We need to push that narrative and look for those crossovers. Absolutely. I hope that in future years, you know, even if we're not successful, I hope we're able to continue to stand up some good candidates for this post. and continue to contest this seat. As the demographics shift, I think we're going to find it easier and easier for us to get some traction here. And especially as people are getting more and more exasperated by what the Republicans are failing to accomplish. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I agree. If you have a question, please just put question in the chat box and if you guys can see that at the very bottom, it says chat. So if you click on that, it will open up. And if you have a question, just say question, and then I'll call on you in that order, okay? So, Stephen, you're first. What would you like to ask the gentleman?
Yes, actually, can I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
Yeah, so I guess my first question has to do with redistricting. So I guess, yeah, next election or next session, I guess the legislature will be redrawing lines for not only the state house, state senate, but also our congressional seats. I was just wondering, what are both of your guys' position on how we should do redistricting in the state of Georgia? And then also, my other question is, due to the coronavirus, our state budget is shot, and I was wondering what are your plans to make up for the budget shortfalls that we're happening right now?
Okay, let's see. Carl or Will, do either of you want to take it first?
Well, I'll take a crack at it, if that's okay.
Okay. Yep.
All right. As far as redistricting goes, I think the Supreme Court recently has made it clear that they're going to leave that entirely up to the state legislature. They're not going to be able to provide any kind of federal oversight for that kind of behavior. So I favor a fairer approach to redistricting. I think that's more based on where people live than who they are, or how much money they make, or what color their skin is, or what political party they tend to vote for. It disturbs me to see very parceled out categories. When I was moving into town, I got a lot of advice from people about, well, live here, but don't live there. And sometimes the places they were talking about were 1 block apart. And I think that's reflected in this redistricting approach. I think there's a lot to be said for districting based on geographic location, and just kind of calling it by that, and by population, finding a way to do it in a way that isn't as susceptible to special interest wanting to move that line just a little bit this way or a little bit this way. I think we tend to redo this every time, but if we're not able to get hold of a majority, it's not going to happen to our benefit. As far as the budget shortfalls, that's something that every state legislature is going to be grappling with right now. I think especially a lot of the extra revenue that we've been able to secure from the film industry has also kind of gone kaput here. But you see a lot of people who are raving to come back to work. There may be an opportunity for us here if we position ourselves well, which we're not currently on the national stage, to get companies who are more mobile, like film companies are, to want to come here as the state is able to reopen safely. But realistically, we're just going to have to borrow a bunch of money. Honestly, we're going to put out a bunch of bonds. We're going to have to borrow a bunch of money, and that's going to be okay, because we got some things that we got to spend that money on right now. Carl?
I agree with Will that our current districting is very much gerrymandered. If you look at some of the congressional districts, like we have both stated regarding our state house district right here, both, I think Dr. Tauxe and I live like at the very southern tip. If we lived just a little bit further south, we would be in District 133 instead. So I do support that if we are able to get the majority, I would support the formation of an independent committee to come up with the district lines, such as I believe that they have it in California for that kind of thing. So there's not that level of gerrymandering. Both parties, of course, would have oversight, equal oversight, not dependent on which party has the majority, but equal oversight. That way, we are able to come up with a more nonpartisan district, because right now what's going on just does not work for the country. In the 2012 election, the Democrats actually won the total House popular vote by 1.2 2%, and yet they were still the minority party by, I think, 30 something seats. Can't remember the exact number, but they won the majority by 1.3%, and yet we're still the minority party by a very large margin. That to me is a nationwide problem, but I do think that the formation of an independent committee here in the state of Georgia to come up with the districting lines is something that both parties should be able to support. And those who don't, they're only looking out for their own political interests when they do that. And as far as overcoming the budget shortfalls, a lot of that's just going to have to be bringing manufacturing jobs back to the state. We're going to have to do that through a variety of methods. There's a lot of energy policy that I want to go over, which would be creating green energy jobs here in the state in the solar and offshore wind. That would provide quite a bit of income coming to the state. But like Dr. Tauxe said, a lot of this is just going to have to come from borrowing money. If we're able to implement a UBI of any sort, then every dollar that a lower or middle income person spends, they add another $1.39 on average to the GDP. So that would boost our tax revenues in implementing the UBI. But a lot of that will end up being dependent on the state or on the national stage rather than us. So we are just going to have to borrow a lot of money.
UBI is universal basic income?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Laura, can I ask just one real quick follow-up question?
If it's very quick, because we've got some
Yes.
questions lined up.
Yes. Would you guys support an increase to the cigarette tax?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, guys.
True to your word. Thank you, Stephen. Next question up is Nick. Where are you?
Hey, right here.
There you are. Right next to me in my film.
Yeah. Okay, so I agree with both of you that this district is significantly younger than it once was, and mostly because of Columbus State's presence and its growing, with the campus growing. As one of the few people in the chat, maybe Carl and Stephen, I know a lot of the CSU students, and I'm well connected with people our age. And one thing that is clear to me right now is people my age, Joe Biden, and we know that young people don't really come out to vote for state house seats. They come out to vote for the bigger ticket candidates like Joe Biden. So, and getting people to the ballot box to vote for you in November or to vote Democrat, young people in particular, how do you speak to those voters who are disillusioned with Joe Biden, and how do you have that conversation?
Carl, why don't you take that since Will took the last one first?
All right. As far as people who are disillusioned by Biden, I think a lot of this is going to be about showing them that Joe Biden is much more progressive than anything that they could ever get out of Donald Trump. So if they support any sort of progressive or socialist policies, they are going to want to put Joe Biden in. When he was in the Senate, he actually had one of the more progressive voting records. One thing that always bothered me during the 2016 election were people who were basically saying Hillary Clinton was a neocon. When you go and look at the Senate voting record between her and Bernie Sanders when they were serving together, they voted 91% of the time the same way. So they're actually a lot more closely aligned than a lot of the people online would want you believe in. If you believe everything that you see on Twitter about this, it's just total nonsense. So I would really just recommend showing them the policies that Joe Biden has already implemented, his time as vice president, the growth in renewable energies, the expansion of healthcare coverage for millions of Americans. I'm actually going to share a little personal story for a second. Back in 2009, I was discovered to have an ultravenous malformation right here on my right frontal lobe, and it was causing me to have severe convulsions, seizures. The doctors actually said that I may have had 2 strokes. I I was going to be kicked off of my parents' insurance, but right when that happened, the Affordable Care Act was passed and it eliminated pre-existing conditions. And because of that, I was able to stay on my parents' insurance. I was able to get the gamma ray knife surgery. That probably saved my life. So the fact is, I credit Joe Biden for his efforts pushing the Affordable Care Act through when there was so much opposition in Congress. Him and President Obama worked so hard on that, and I know it's not perfect. We all know it's not perfect, but that saved my life. So I think that sharing personal stories such as that and really getting voters to understand that we are making progress and Joe Biden has helped make that progress, that will encourage them to come out and vote for Joe Biden.
Thanks, Carl. Will?
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think thanks for the question. I think what we're seeing right now is that Joe Biden is not really needing to run for president too much. He's mostly running a front porch campaign, and just letting Donald Trump do most of the campaigning for Joe Biden. And that seems to be working pretty well at the moment. I think I spent some time listening to the Supreme Court arguments today. I think we'll be very interested to see how the final ruling comes out on that. From our perspective, you know, I think I'm very glad to hear that Mr. Sprayberry, that you were able to get some good treatment for that, like you need to. Those AVMs are terrible, and I think both you and I are cautionary tales and object lessons, in the sense that, you know, neither of us are getting ill because of a poor decision that we made. You know, it's not like we're getting emphysema after a lifetime of smoking and then we're trying to expect everybody to care for that. We're you know, having legitimate issues that kind of crop up through no fault of our own that, you know, need to be taken care of if we're going to be able to be productive members of society. And I think showing how we take care of our fellow citizens is one of the bigger things that we can demonstrate here as Democrats. I think the ACA is just sort of exemplary of the general way that we try to make our health institutions and our other institutions strong in that way. I think finding ways to highlight that difference in the GOP response and the way that the Democrats are trying to find ways to help is going to be where we make a lot of our hay. And nobody knows exactly what's going to happen in November. Perhaps the economy will come roaring back, but I think as long as Donald Trump continues to tweet and get up on do his lectures, we may see a lot more reverse coattails than we're expecting at the time of the ballot box. Okay.
Great. All right, Will, stay unmuted because the next question you'll get the first crack at, and that is from Bill. Oh,
okay.
All right, there we go.
Okay. I really don't need a lot of discussion about the question I'm asking. You're running as to be representatives for a house, for a state house seat. I'm curious, you know, your own personal assessment, how familiar are you of legislative processes and the issues that a state legislator deals with? Because you will be running against a person who is chair of the Rules Committee. He certainly understands how the state legislature works and what the issues are. So what's your assessment of your own knowledge of legislative procedures and the state issues?
Thanks, Bill.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Well, I think it's certainly true that Richard Smith has a great deal of knowledge regarding the functions and operations of the state legislature, but I think that does us no good as citizens of Muskogee if he's not going to use that knowledge for our benefit. Let me see, my current assessment of my own knowledge regarding the Georgia State Legislature is I give myself maybe a C overall. I'll admit that hasn't been a focus of concerted effort, but I am a very fast learner. I feel like I am pretty aware of a lot of the political issues that we're facing right now. I've been present in a lot of debates and various government clubs. Let me see. And and always in meetings, I'm usually the guy who pipes up and likes to ask the awkward question about the thing that nobody else really wanted to bring up. I think that's a voice that we need in the legislature. I think largely what your role as legislator boils down to is making those connections in the state house, making speeches to a lesser extent, and making votes to an even lesser extent. It mostly comes down to making those connections. I think I was impressed when I went to go sign up to vote that I saw a real community emerging over in the Democrat room where everybody was coming in to drop off their forms, and a lot of storks walking around in black suits over on the Republican side, making awkward small talk. All right. There.
Carl.
Yes, as far as the legislative, the actual process and getting things done, I was in Model UN for several years in high school, so I'm used to dealing with the debates back and forth. I have managerial experience working in high, fast-paced environments, so I'm used to any sort of stress such as that. Plus, I'm not going to say his name, but I used to work for a now former state house representative, and I'm going to let you all know he does not like Donald Trump, but he and I would discuss things, so I kind of feel like any personal connections, he is actually willing to help me out even though he's not a Democrat.
Bill, any follow-up? Okay, great. It looks like we just have one more question from Harry. Harry, I see you're back inside now. What is your question?
Okay, thanks, Laura. And I'm glad for all those questions that were answered and everything that I wrote, and I was like, had to pack them all in. So I have questions on 5 issues and everything, like just to ask them really, really quick. 1, in Georgia, we don't have the right to petition the government to put questions on the ballot, and also the only way that we can have questions on the ballot is if a state legislator puts it on the ballot and it gets approved by 2/3 of both houses. And we see the result of it because we get rather crappy amendments. And I'm sorry about this sound and everything. It's an apartment building. So we get these amendments or that are put on the ballots, and they're largely written to be answered with a yes and not with discernment by the public in mind and everything. So what would be your stance on legalizing or a constitutional amendment to allow for ballot initiatives and everything to be put forward through petitioning the public and petitioning the Secretary of State? And that's the first question. The second one is...
Well, Harry, let's go one at a time because we have 5 minutes technically left in this forum, but I think we can go over. But it would be too hard to remember everything if you went all full force. So first question, and I lost track of who was last, honestly. Who would like to take that one?
I'll take it. I would definitely support allowing more direct democracy via ballot petitions. That's perfectly fine with me. I would definitely support any legislation that would come up to make a constitutional amendment to that.
All right, and if I can just jump in there after Carl, let me see. So I lived in California for a couple of years actually, and they do have a lot of things that end up on the bill. I think as you're mentioning, a lot of these things are kind of written very carefully and very confusingly, and that's another thing that you can do if you're able to take the test at home with your mail-in ballot and actually kind of puzzle it out and do your read and do your research on those. I think having the ability to put something on the ballot with a number of signatures, I think, is a perfectly reasonable exercise of democracy. So I would absolutely support that.
Okay, Harry, what's your next most important question?
Next most important question. So we're talking a lot about redistricting and everything, and also welcome Daniel and everything, Daniel Blackman running for PSC. Second one is ranked choice voting in multi-member districts, where we currently have a movement for ranked choice voting in several other states, for city councils, and for other offices and everything, or other legislatures. And what the effect of it is like it reduces the whole spoiler effect or wasted votes and everything, and it reduces the need for competition and increases more cooperation between candidates running for the same office. And also multi-member districts, or using them in multi-member districts or at-large districts, also increases that cooperation as well, and makes it easier to draw more districts and everything, for like better districts for in urban areas, especially areas that are more dense and more competitive, so that we can increase that. So what would be your stance on ranked choice voting in multi-member districts in Georgia for the Georgia General Assembly and City Council and County Commission?
Okay, I guess I went last first. I'll go first now. I'm in favor of it. I think what it enables you to do is to do the runoff right there instead of holding another election, which is more expensive and unnecessary. I think most people go into those elections with a sense of, kind of who they don't want in addition to who they really do want. And I think that in and of itself is a valuable vote to be able to register in some way. I'm also in favor of the interstate compact that likes to allocate the electoral votes based on the basis of the popular vote, regardless of however our states goes. I think there's a lot that's worth having a debate over in the state house, I think. Carl?
Yes. As far as that amendment to the allowing all the states, whoever wins the popular vote, their electoral votes for each state of that member of the compact. I read about that a few years ago. I find that very interesting. I would be in total support of that. And I think that would solve a lot of the issues that we currently have with more rural states that have more electoral power than their population actually warrants, simply because they have so few people, but they're guaranteed a certain number of electoral votes. And as far as ranked choice voting, I think that is very interesting. I would not be against it. I think if we did have ranked choice voting, we would probably have at least a fair number of third parties winning seats from now on, which, hey, that's fine.
Okay, Harry, let's do one last question, okay? Pick your best.
Oh, this is a toughie. So present, like the relationship of our correction system to democracy. So here in Georgia, we have two major factors which make us quite a prison state, if you will, where we disenfranchise people who are in prison, who are currently serving in prison, and only allow them to to gain their voting rights back after they've made all the restitutions and everything. And also the Census Bureau also counts our votes it counts our prisoners not at their last home district or like their last district of free residence, but in the prison that they're incarcerated, which also affects when we redraw the maps and everything for redistricting, that we also inflate the count and everything for congressional and legislative and county districts based upon the population of prisoners in rural areas. What is your opinion on felony disenfranchisement, and also whether we should count prisoners in their home districts rather than in the prison that they are currently incarcerated?
So, as far as counting the prisoners in the district that they are currently incarcerated, I believe that they should be counted in their home district. And can you repeat the other part of the question?
The other part of the question is disenfranchising people who are currently serving in prison, if that is worth it, and everything as far as disenfranchising them of their civil rights, including voting.
Okay, as far as giving them back their right to vote, after they have served their sentence, their time is up, they have paid back all of their dues to society. I see no reason why we should institute a poll tax, kind of like Florida has, before permitting them to have their right to vote again. I think once they've served their time, they've paid their dues, they should be able to vote just like any one of us.
All right. Yeah, on this issue, I disagree a little bit with you guys. Actually, I think felons should be able to vote. I think you should be able to vote at whatever address you receive mail, which is where you should receive your ballot, where you fill it out and then you mail it back in. I favor universal enfranchisement, and I think I think we should remove the voting age also here in Georgia. I think if you're living in Georgia and you are subject to the laws in Georgia, you should have a vote about those laws. I think the same arguments that you're making with regard to prisoners can also be made with regards to children, in the sense that they are counted towards the vote, but they are not able to vote for it. I think there's a lot of issues that they are, passionate about and would probably be willing to have an interest in if they were able to. So I think letting prisoners vote kind of solves that issue right there. I think it's a very unfair practice as it's currently organized, and needs some fixing.
I agree, and I want to just share something I learned when I went up to the State House to a Board of Elections meeting to advocate for allowing former felons, after they get out, to be able to vote. And one of the big issues that I didn't realize is that a felon or a person who has committed a felony and been imprisoned, if they come out and pay their restitution, the whole 9 yards, which, definitely could be construed as a poll tax, but also if they committed a crime that is qualified as moral turpitude, which there is no legal definition for on the books, then they're not supposed to be able to, then they're not going to be able to regain their rights. And the question to the legislators is, what qualifies as moral turpitude? If you're going to have that in there, then you need to define it. And so anyway, that could be something maybe y'all could work on in the coming sessions. So, all right, anybody else with another question? Well, I think that we're good. Gentlemen, a quick closing statement. Let's see, how about Carl first, if you have anything you want to wrap up with?
Yes, a couple of the issues that we didn't get to go over that I would like to state that I would like to do. I believe we should ratify the Equal Rights Amendment to the United States Constitution. I realize that it might not be constitutional for it to become an actual amendment to the United States Constitution because of how long it has been since it was originally produced. But Georgia is one of less than 20 states to not ratify it so far. I believe that we should target the closure of all coal plants, and by 2040, at the very latest, we have a thriving nuclear industry, we have a thriving solar industry, we have the potential of offshore wind energy in conjunction with the Carolinas and Florida. So I see no reason why we wouldn't be able to move towards a more green approach. As of a few minutes ago, actually, the nation of the UK, the United Kingdom, has now gone 33 continuous days with zero coal energy being used. And so I don't see why a nation of, I think, 162 million people, if they're able to get off coal, I don't see why we in Georgia can't do it. And I would support raising the minimum wage because I just don't see it possibly getting through the House and the Senate if the Democrats are not able to take a large enough majority in the Senate this election year. I support the repeal of the fetal heartbeat bill. And of course, I support more environmental protections and infrastructure spending.
Carl, it sounds like once you win, you plan on being there for a while.
Hopefully. Young, so.
Get
Thanks,
that
Carl.
seniority. That's right. Okay. Well, I unfortunately, I'm a little bit older than Carl, so I don't know if I'd be able to be in office quite as long.
You're not that much older.
That's right. Okay. Well, Carl and I are both millennials, by the way, and I'm very pleased with how collegial this has been. We're already on a first name basis, and that's great. I really appreciate all the fabulous questions that we're getting from the committee and from everybody else who's called in here. I would do my best if I was elected to be in contact with everybody at all time, being very responsive. I think that's important. I like talking with people about the issues that concern them. There's a lot of things that we can get done as Democrats here in Georgia, and I think there's a lot that we can do together in those sense. And I would look forward to working with all of you, and support. I'll be happy to knock on doors from a safe distance for Carl if he ends up winning this. I think we got the start of a movement here. So I'm really thankful to all of you guys, and I look forward to seeing how this shakes out.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Carl. I am really excited. Bill, go ahead. I'm sorry.
If our candidates could please give us some way of getting in contact with them, and basically so we can know how to get to them. I know I live in their district, and I didn't know how to find out any information about them.
Absolutely. I will, they will send me their, any social media, website, contact information, and I'll forward it out to our post committee and anyone else who requests it. And okay, before we go, since Mr. Blackman is here with us, would you like to say, introduce yourself and just, a minute or so of since you popped in?
Yes, ma'am. Well, first of all, thank you. I'm a native of Columbus, Georgia. My father was a United States Army Ranger, and I moved to Atlanta to attend Clark Atlanta University. I am the first African-American to have ever run for office in Forsyth County, Georgia. I left Atlanta because Democrats in Metro Atlanta have gotten really comfortable with being able to win there, but around the state, we've lagged. And I decided to run for the Public Service Commission for two reasons. Number one, because if you follow the construction of nuclear plant Vogtle, we've overinvested into fossil fuel energy and underinvested into clean energy. When you look at what's going on right now with COVID-19, my wife and I are the parents of 3 children. We have the means to have high-speed internet, but many children in Georgia have to go in front of a Chick-fil-A or a McDonald's to use the internet. And the Public Service Commission, as many people don't know, not only regulates utilities, but makes investment into infrastructure that helps our small businesses and our communities. Lastly, I would really invite all of you to visit my website, which is danielforgeorgia.com. That's DANIELFOR, Georgia, spelled out.com. The Public Service Commission is a statewide election. So even though my district is the entirety of North Georgia, District 2 and District 4 are on the ballot. I would appreciate your vote. Look me up. And since I have limited time, my personal cell phone number is 404-437-3979. I'll add that to the chat. If you have a personal question for me, out of respect for this meeting, please call me directly and I'll tell you all about my platform, which is to really have a voice for the people at the Public Service Commission and take us towards a clean energy future. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to hearing from each of you.
Thank you, Daniel. That's really exciting. I'm so pleased with how this went. I hope that everybody felt heard and everyone learned something new about, hopefully, someone who's going to be representing us in the very near future. I wanted to let you know that we're having another forum like this for the district attorney's seat on Thursday night. So check your emails for that link that's already been sent out, and it's a Facebook event. And then we look forward to getting to know you, Mr. Blackman, but also Carl and Will a little bit better. And election day is in 1 month. So get out there. We can't wait. We cannot wait to vote for one of you. I wish I was in your district. I am not.
I'm not gonna say I'm glad to see young blood. I'm glad to see new blood. It's time for us to get out of old habits and try to invest in new habits. And I'm glad to hear what I heard from both of you tonight. And I can tell you right now, with COVID-19, we are learning that we are stuck in the past. And it's time for us to invest in new models for our grandchildren.
Agreed. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We'll send out Carl and Will's in contact information, and take care. See you Thursday. Bye.
Bye, everyone.